Hey folks, welcome back to True Crime Stories, where we cover the most thrilling true crime stories. Before we get going, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for me. Thanks. And now let's get into today's story.
Okay, so are you ready to get a little chilly with me today?
I think I can handle it.
All right, good. Because we are heading way up north to Cedarwood, Alaska for this deep dive.
Ah, Cedarwood.
And it's a story well, it's going to send shivers down your spine, even if it isn't below zero where you are.
Yeah, this one's a real head scratcher.
It is. It is. And it really does have all the classic elements of a true crime thriller.
Oh, yeah. You've got the small town, the idyllic setting, the beloved local who vanishes.
Right. And we've got a ton of material to dig through for this one. I mean, we're talking news articles, police reports.
Witness testimonies. Oh, and even some excerpts from a novel that is set in a very similar town.
Yeah, it's a little creepy how close they are.
A little bit, yeah.
So let's start with the basics. We're talking about the disappearance of David Sims.
Right. And to understand what makes this case so strange, we need to understand Cedarwood itself.
Okay, paint me a picture.
Well, imagine a town where everyone knows their neighbors, like really knows them.
Like, knows what they had for breakfast, kind of knows them.
Exactly. And where the winters are long and dark and the sense of community runs deep.
Okay, so very close-knit, very isolated.
Right. And in a town like that, when someone disappears, it's like dropping a stone into a still pond. The ripples spread out and touch every single person.
Yeah, I can imagine that.
So David Sims, he was a dedicated teacher, a father, a really talented artist.
Yeah, he was working on this big ice sculpture for the town's winter festival. He was supposed to be a symbol of their unity.
Right, and he disappears just days before the festival.
Okay, so let's rewind to the night David was last seen. It was a Friday night, and he was at the local diner, the Northern Lights.
Right, and he's there with Ella, a wildlife biologist, and Becca, a waitress.
Ah, so small-town diner scene.
Yeah, and they're just chatting, talking about the festival.
Everything seems normal.
Pretty much. But then David mentions this old rivalry he has with another artist in town, a guy named Samuel.
Oh, okay, so a little tension there.
Maybe. And Samuel's a bit of a recluse, known for his dark, kind of brooding artwork.
Okay, so now we've got a rivalry, a missing person, a brooding artist.
Yeah.
Sounds like the setup for mystery novel.
Right, and it gets even more complicated.
Oh, I bet it does.
So David leaves the diner that night, and that's the last anyone sees of him.
So he just vanishes.
He doesn't come home, doesn't show up for work the next day. His phone goes straight to voicemail.
Like he just stepped off the face of the earth.
And naturally, when he doesn't show up to help with the festival preparations, people start to worry.
Yeah, I'd be freaking out.
His wife, Janet, reports him missing, and the whole town launches a search.
I bet that's a sight to see, a whole town searching for one guy.
Yeah, they've got the sheriff, Mark Rivers, leading the search, and he knows Cedarwood like the back of his hand.
Okay, so you've got everyone looking for David, but they're coming up empty.
For days, there's nothing. No sign of him, no clues, no leads.
Talk about a mystery.
But then Ella, the wildlife biologist, she's out in the woods miles from town tracking wolves.
Okay, dedicated biologist.
Yeah, and she stumbles across something that sends chills down everyone's spine. Deep in the woods, snagged on a branch, is David's scarf.
Okay, that's already creepy.
Oh, and it gets worse. It's stained with blood.
Oh, no. So now it's not just a missing person case.
No, now it's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, that's when the peaceful facade of Cedarwood really starts to crumble. And everyone starts to wonder, what secrets are lurking beneath the surface of this quiet little town?
And who could be responsible for this?
Welcome back to our deep dive into the Cedarwood mystery. Last time we left off with that chilling discovery of David's blood-soaked scarf out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, and that really changes the whole complexion of the investigation.
Absolutely. Goes from a missing person to something much more sinister.
Exactly. And that sense of fear and suspicion really starts to take hold in Cedarwood.
I can imagine. Everyone's looking at each other sideways, wondering who could be capable of something like this.
Right. And the investigators, they're trying to piece together what happened. They start looking at the people closest to David, trying to find any possible motive, any connection to his disappearance.
So let's start with Samuel, the artist that David mentioned having a rivalry with.
Right, Samuel. Remember, he's a bit of a loner, known for his dark and brooding artwork.
Yeah, the classic outsider.
And to some folks, he becomes an easy target for suspicion. Small town, someone disappears, people start looking for someone to blame.
Right, but suspicion doesn't equal guilt.
Of course not. And the investigators, they're trying to be careful not to jump to any conclusions. But they do dig into Samuel's life, looking for any connection to David's disappearance.
And do they find anything?
Well, let's just say Samuel remains a person of interest. But the investigation doesn't stop there. They're also looking at other people in David's life.
Okay, so who else is on their radar?
Well, there's Leela, the
Oh,
journalist.
yeah, she's the ambitious one, right?
Exactly. She's relatively new to town, and she sees this story as her big break.
The kind of reporter who's willing to bend the rules a little to get the scoop.
Maybe even break a few. And her ambition, coupled with the fact that she's an outsider, makes her a target of suspicion. Some folks wonder if she might have had something to do with David's disappearance, maybe even stage the whole thing for a story.
Wow, that's a pretty wild theory.
It is. But as the investigation unfolds, it becomes clear that the truth is a lot more complicated than anyone could have imagined.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat here. What happens next?
Well, remember those white fibers that were found on David's scarf?
Yeah, the ones that were kind of a mystery.
Right. Well, turns out they're a perfect match to a sweater that Janet, David's wife, was wearing the night he disappeared.
Whoa, hold on. Janet, David's wife.
Yeah. And during questioning, Janet starts to get really nervous. Her story keeps changing. She's contradicting herself.
So she's acting suspicious.
Very suspicious. And then during a second interview, she breaks down. She confesses that she and David had a huge fight the night he disappeared.
Oh, wow. What were they fighting about?
It sounds like a lot of things had been building up. Janet was feeling neglected, overwhelmed by David's focus on the festival.
Remember, he was really dedicated to that ice sculpture, the symbol of unity.
Right, but for Janet, it represented everything that was wrong in their marriage. All the pressure, all the unspoken resentment.
So the perfect image of their marriage was just a facade.
Exactly. And during the fight, things escalated. Janet pushed David, he fell, hit his head, and that was it.
She accidentally killed him.
That's what she says. It was an accident, a horrible, tragic accident.
So what did she do next?
Panicked. Instead of calling for help, she decided to cover up what happened. She drove David's body out to the woods and left him there.
Oh my God. She made a terrible choice in a moment of panic.
It was a decision that would change her life forever and the lives of everyone in Cedarwood.
All right, so we're back. And we know what happened to David. It was a tragic accident, a fight that went too far, and a cover-up that just spiraled out of control.
Yeah, and now the town has to deal with the fallout. I mean, Janet, this pillar of the community, she's admitted to causing her husband's death.
Right. So what happens next? What does justice look like in a town like Cedarwood?
Well, Janet is charged with involuntary manslaughter. And the trial, it really becomes this focal point for the town's grief and anger.
I can only imagine the tension in that courtroom.
Oh, it was palpable. You had people who were furious with Janet, who saw her actions as a complete betrayal.
And others who felt sympathy for her.
Right. Some folks understood the pressure she was under, the isolation, the way that things can just kind of boil over in a small town.
It's like everyone in Cedarwood is forced to take sides.
Yeah. And the trial really exposes these deep divisions within the community. It's like this wound that just keeps getting ripped open.
No, what was the verdict?
Well, the jury, they found Janet guilty. But they also seem to acknowledge the unintentional nature of her actions.
So what was the sentence?
5 years in prison.
5 years. That's a long time in a place like Cedarwood.
It is. But for Janet, it's also a chance to maybe come to terms with what happened. And for the town, it's a chance to start healing, to figure out how to move forward.
But they've lost so much. David was such a big part of Cedarwood.
He was. But here's the thing about small towns. They're resilient. They have a way of coming together when times get tough.
So how does Cedarwood start to rebuild after something like this?
Well, they had to make a decision about the winter festival. Do they cancel it? Do they try to move on?
Tough call.
It was. But a group of residents, they decided to reimagine the festival. They saw it as an opportunity to honor David, to celebrate his life and his vision of a united town.
I love that. Turning something tragic to something beautiful.
Exactly. And remember that unfinished ice sculpture?
Yeah, the symbol of unity that David was working on.
Well, they finished it. They made it the centerpiece of the festival.
Wow. What a powerful image.
It was. It was a way for them to channel their grief into something positive, to show that even though they're hurting, they're not going to let this break them.
So they're finding a way to move forward together.
They are, but they're also not shying away from the hard conversations. They're talking about the pressures of small town life, about the importance of mental health, about making sure that people feel supported and heard.
It's like they're learning from this tragedy, trying to prevent something like this from happening again.
Absolutely. They're recognizing that even in the most idyllic of settings, darkness can exist, and that sometimes the strongest communities are the ones that are willing to face their demons head on.
And so the story of Cedarwood, it's a story of loss, of betrayal, of the dark side of human nature, but it's also a story of resilience, of forgiveness, of the enduring power of community. It's a reminder that even in the face of tragedy, there's always hope for healing, for growth, and for a brighter future. And that's something we can all hold on to, no matter what challenges we face in our own lives.
Agave.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. It's been a journey, but I think we've all learned something along the way.
I think so too. And hopefully, we can all take these lessons with us and create a little more light in the world.